Okay, Margaret, we're live and going, so whenever we have quorum in a couple minutes, we'll be ready to go.
Okay. Thank you, David. Shane, just so you know, because really all I can see is the PowerPoint, you might want to take a look at the attendees and see if we have quorum, and then I'll let you get started when you're ready.
Looks like we got, I'm seeing at least 13 participants. I think we need to have 10 for quorum, so I think we're pretty close. I'll just give it another minute here. I'm showing 9:59 here.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, looks like 10 a.m. So we'll get going. So I'll call the meeting to order. This is our MAG Transportation Safety Committee, May 26th. Looks like we have about 14 participants online. We need 10 for quorum, so we'll go through the quorum call here, run through the names. I think everybody's on mute, or most everybody's on mute, but when I call your name, I'll go somewhat slow so you have time to unmute yourself and recognize that you're here. So I'll start going through the list. All right, first one's Carrie with ADOT. Carrie. I think I saw Carrie. All right, Shane with Apache Junction, that's me, I am here. Do we have Tom with Avondale? All right, I don't hear Tom. What about John with Buckeye? No John. Raymond with Chandler? All right, I don't hear Raymond. Nick with El Mirage?
Yeah, good morning, I'm here.
All right, Nick. Aaron with Gilbert? No Aaron. Hugh with Goodyear?
This is Luke Albert from Goodyear, substituting for Hugh.
All right, super. And do we have Woodward with Litchfield Park? Sounds like no for Litchfield Park. Josh with Maricopa?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do we have Nicholas with Maricopa County? Sounds like nobody with Maricopa County. How about Ryan with Mesa?
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, Ryan. Do we have Jeremy with Paradise Valley? No Paradise Valley. How about Brandon with Peoria?
Here.
Thank you. And then Mr. Langford Carl with Phoenix, I think he is out. Kathy with Pinell County?
Here.
Thank you, Kathy. We hear you. Thank you. Sam with Scottsdale?
I'm here.
Thanks, Sam. How about Dana with Surprise?
Hi, I'm here. Thanks.
Thank you, Dana. Julian with Tempe?
Kathy Hollow for Tempe.
Kathy, thank you. Adrian with Valley Metro RPTA? Doesn't sound like Valley Metro. What about Jeff with Federal Highways? Nothing from Jeff. Alberto Gutierrez with Governor's Office of Highway Safety. Sounds like no Alberto. And then Margaret. And also Mohammed.
We're here, but we don't count towards quorum. So, and right
Yeah.
now,
This is Tony Abel with Glendale.
Okay. Going with Glendale.
Aaron Pinkerton with Gilbert.
And who with Gilbert?
Aaron Pinkerton.
Okay. All right. Is that looking like 10, Margaret, from your count?
I'm counting 12.
All right. Good enough for quorum. So with that, quorum is present. Just a reminder, if you're on the phone, if you could just recognize your mute button. We do get a lot of interference, so if you are not talking, please mute yourself so we don't have any interference. Also, participating, I believe there's a chat button on the bottom of your screen. If you move your screen, your mouse around, you'll see a chat button. So that'd be a good way to be recognized to speak. As we move forward too, I'll try to get plenty of time in between items just to give us time to unmute and chime in as necessary. So with that, we'll move on in the agenda. Next item for the agenda is approval of the minutes. It is the March 24th minutes of the teleconference that we held back on March 24th. Hopefully everybody is able to review the minutes. If not, I'll give you a quick minute here to take a look, but I am looking for a motion for the approval of the minutes if there's any change.
Mr. Chairman, if you're ready for a motion, I move to approve the minutes from March 24th meeting. This is Kathy, by the way.
All right, that's Kathy. Thank you, Kathy. So we do have.
And the other Kathy will second.
And we have a second. All right, I do have a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and proceed with the roll call for the vote. And I'll quickly read through the names here and go ahead and give a or a nay for motion for your vote to move the minutes. All right. I'll start with myself. I'll be a yay. And then we have Nick with El Mirage.
Yay.
Then we have Goodyear.
Yay.
How about Maricopa?
Yay.
Mesa?
Yay.
Peoria?
Yay.
And then Kathy with Pinell County?
Yay.
Scottsdale? Sam with Scottsdale?
Aye.
Thank you, Sam. How about Dana, Surprise?
Yay.
And Tempe?
Yay.
And Glendale?
Yay.
And I think we had Gilbert.
Yay.
All right, did I miss anybody? All
Looks
right,
like you've got anybody unless somebody's joined since, so.
yep. So it sounds like the yeas take it. Minutes for the 26th have passed. All right, moving on to item 3 on the agenda. Looks like a programs report. Margaret, any updates on anything?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Transportation Safety Committee. I'm going to keep my report very short today. We have a very long and detailed meeting that we anticipate having, so I'm going to keep this rather short. I just kind of wanted to update you on the 2020 crossing guard trainings. Due to the COVID situation, we are going live this year. We are coordinating with our IT department. They're doing a lot of work, and also with our planning team that works with MAG on a regular basis. We are going to do a similar format that we're doing today, but then it's going to be on Facebook. So we did send an invitation letter out to the superintendents in April. We let them know about the new format, and we encourage everyone to attend, even if you don't typically attend. It would be really nice. We get a lot of comments on the surveys from the different crossing guards that they would like to have their representative from their local agency be in attendance. So there's going to be an opportunity for them to be asking questions. So it'd be really great if you all could be in attendance. We'll send out a link prior to about a week before. That's going to be on July 30th. So from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. For our 2020 projects, we've mostly postponed these till we can reschedule them when it's appropriate. So our local agency safety studies, our road safety assessments, project assessments, as well as the safe routes to school studies. We almost got through completion of all the safe routes to school studies, but the main task that was not able to proceed was the neighborhood or school community meetings that typically happen with those studies. And so we will be looking forward to, whenever schools open back up, conducting those meetings and completing the safe routes to school studies. And then as far as our programming is concerned, we postponed the safe routes to school call for projects. We're going to go ahead and align it with the fall call for projects that typically happens in August. As soon as we get a definite schedule for that, that will be coming from our planning division. So we are also going to move forward with our second call for road safety program projects. I'm looking to reconvening the working group that helped us develop that program, so we can kind of talk about some lessons learned and seeing if there's anything that we want to change, either in the applications or the guidance or anything like that. So look for me to reach out to those of you who are participating on that working group. And of course, if you hadn't previously and would like to, you can go ahead and reach out to me by email and let me know that you'd like to participate. And with that, that concludes my program manager's report, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair and Margaret, I just want to let you know, Don Willett from Buckeye is here. He approved the minutes as well. Just want to make sure he's added to the list too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. All right, we'll move on to item number 4. This is the 2019 Strategic Transportation Safety Plan, Action Areas and Strategies. In the fiscal year 2019 MAG work program included a project to develop a comprehensive update to the MAG Strategic Transportation Safety Plan. MAG staff, the consultant team, and multidisciplinary, multi-agency member Transportation Safety Committee stakeholders group have worked on several tasks to guide the development of this plan. The TSSG has reached one of the first critical points in developing the plan, the identification of action areas and associated strategies to be promoted in the STSP and the next RTP. Materials related to each action area and strategies associated with the regional safety issues identified were sent to committee members prior to this meeting for review, I believe last week. A detailed review of the materials will be provided by the MAG staff and the consultant team. Committee members are encouraged to be recognized to provide input and discussion on the material action areas and strategies. Consensus on these elements is requested as a recommendation to be proposed to the MAG policy committees prior to moving forward with further development of the plan. So Margaret, I'll have you, I guess, lead it off. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Transportation Safety Committee. Just to kind of introduce, first of all, where we've been and where we're going. Task 1 was promoting a culture of safety. Task 2 was looking at crash data and identifying the state of road safety for the period of 2009 through 2018. Task 3 was to establish regional vision, goals, and action areas. So all these steps kind of build up to where we are today in discussing the action areas that you see there on the left side of your screen. Pedestrians action area and intersections action area, one focusing on lane departure, as well as safety related data. Task 4, I should mention, is another kind of big task. We're not really going to be focusing on that one today, but just so you have a reminder that that was to develop a pedestrian and bicyclist safety education program. So we are well on our way with that. We also put in amendment to our work program for 2021 to include some funding to further develop that safety education and enforcement program. We are anticipating a pilot program to start in the spring of next year, 2021. So where we're at today, we are going to take a look first at the pedestrians action area. And the 3 things that we would really like everyone to kind of keep in mind as we review these is the identified regional culture of safety. We did some couple of different surveys, both international and national, as well as around Arizona. And then we did some public outreach to kind of gauge the attitudes of traffic safety in the MAG region. So with that, the stakeholders group is still considering, but we wanted to make sure that we get it on for consideration that the regional culture of safety is to encourage everyone to incorporate safety attitudes as well as actions into safe behaviors, and that we all have a role to play in improving safety. The regional vision that's been identified is that it's really no death or injury is acceptable, but as it relates to this specific action area, it's no pedestrian death or injury is acceptable. So overall, we are looking at taking a safe systems approach. This is paraphrased from FHWA, and it's the idea that humans make mistakes. We should design a system that reduces the number and severity resulting from these mistakes. Understanding the interaction among road users, roadways, roadsides, vehicles, speed, and incident management. Shared is, again, this is kind of inconsistent with the regional culture of safety, that it's a shared responsibility of those who build, use, and enforce. So with that, we'll move on. So why pedestrians? It's probably pretty obvious to everybody here in this region that this would be, pedestrians would be a main focus of this plan, as well as everything that we do at MAG and in our region. So for the period of 2009 through 2018, these are the pedestrian crash annual averages for the 10 years for the MAG region. The 10-year annual average of the pedestrian crashes in the MAG region account for 1,110 crashes, or 71% of pedestrian crashes in Arizona. So for the 10-year period, an annual average of 1,051 people are injured and 100 people die. Most improvements for pedestrian safety will also improve bicyclist safety. We will include unique strategies for bicyclist safety considered in pretty much all our action areas for promotion into the STSP and the RTP. So what this graphic is really looking at here is the MAG region's impact or the crash occurrence and how we move forward and what kind of strategies we pull together can really have an impact on the state of pedestrian safety in the state as a whole. So as you can see on the left side of the screen there, the 86% of the non-motorized deaths are pedestrian versus bike. So you can see they're consistent with what I mentioned earlier, 108 pedestrians and 18 bicyclists. And that is for deaths. 47% occur at non-intersection locations. So that's 527 of the 1,110 occur at non-intersection. And though as well, 50% occur at intersections. So that's 557 of the 1,110 occur at intersection locations. So taking a look at some of the engineering countermeasures, we rely heavily on the FHWA proven countermeasures for pedestrians at intersections for this particular, these countermeasures that we're looking at in particular for intersection crashes. So as you can see, about 8.8 out of 10 pedestrians are injured or die when struck by a left or right turning vehicle at intersections. Down below that, the 50% occur at intersections, as I mentioned before. Of those, 96% are related to left or right turning vehicles. And of those, 88% are injured and deaths. So one of the leading proven FHWA proven countermeasures is the leading pedestrian interval. We can provide more information if you need it on what exactly that is, but it typically gives pedestrians additional time. The federal highways, the federal highways research shows that there's a 13% pedestrian crash reduction, and that would be for all non-motorized crashes by 16 in 1 year based on that annual average that I mentioned before of non-motorized crashes. One of the things that we'd like to really highlight here with some of these is the economic loss. We don't really talk about this a whole lot, but I thought it was interesting and relevant that we take a look at this as well. So the 8.8 that I mentioned before, injured and death, amounts to approximately $126 million per year based on that annual average of non-motorized crashes occurring at intersections. So some of the other intersection countermeasures that we would like to take a look at promoting or maybe combining for a large project that we might do some further analysis in implementation of the STSP is left turn prohibitions, some traffic calming or hardening, right turn on red prohibitions. One of the things that I've seen more and more a little bit these days is the flashing yellow right. Really helps you focus on the crosswalk itself before you turn right and if there's a pedestrian there. So just more information. Also curb extensions, they have a 32% crash reduction. Lighting and illumination predicts a 59% crash reduction, as well as transit stop improvements. So that can mean very many things, as you probably all are aware. So I wanted to show an example of hardening if you don't know what that is. As you can see, it helps really structure the movement of the vehicle and give more cover for the pedestrian that's crossing. It also makes the driver more aware of the pedestrian that might be in the crosswalk. So you can see kind of on the left, just kind of a diagram of that, and then kind of a real world situation on the right, lower right there. So I know this is a lot of information, but we really want to highlight the fact that there's a lot of different things that we could do to improve pedestrian safety. These particular countermeasures are for non-intersections. So it's that 5,272 crashes, and that is the 10-year total. So starting with the left-hand side there, you can see that 49% of those had coded on the crash report that there was low or no lighting. So out of that 5,000 pedestrian crashes, 1,893 were injured and 589 died. Adding more new lighting may reduce these crashes by 59%. And all these percentages that we're showing for crash reduction are based on either the HSM or the Crash Modification Clearinghouse on the FHWA webpage. So moving down lower on the left-hand side, you can see that 5.5 in 10 pedestrian crashes may be eliminated with installation of HOCs. With the existing conditions that you see there just to the right of that, coded as in non-motorized crashes. So when you have these three conditions, low or no illumination, reduced by 51%, dark is coded as 67%, and a quarter to half a mile from signalized intersection, 69% of the non-intersection crashes are coded as being located either a quarter to half a mile from the signalized intersection. Moving further down below, you see that 2.6 in 4 pedestrian crashes may be mitigated by installation of walkways, paths, and shoulders. So 60% of the non-intersection crashes or pedestrian crashes that occur have coded that the pedestrian was located in the roadway. Moving on to the right-hand side, you see that 19 to 47% could be, 19 to 47% of pedestrian crashes at non-intersection could be mitigated with lane repurposing. So these could be various treatments, including reducing travel lanes and bulb outs that may reduce pedestrian crashes up to 47%. Moving further down below, we talked about transit improvements a little bit on the previous page. That is relevant to both intersection as well as non-intersection. But seeing as though we have quite a few more non-intersection, we wanted to really highlight some potential for transit improvements. And what we have here on the slide is from a 2018 MAG study that Mohammed actually managed, and it showed that 4 in 10 pedestrians are involved in crashes resulting in serious injury, or SI, or death, and that would be K, signified with K, on arterial segments with closely spaced bus stops. So how do you define that? So for purposes of this study, it was greater than the average number of bus stops placed per 1,000 feet of analyzed arterial segments. So as you can see, of those crashes, 36% fatal and serious injury pedestrian crashes occurred where you have dense bus stop, on segments that have dense bus stops. And 39% of those analyzed segments, pedestrian fatal and serious injuries occurred at mid-block. And finally, medians and crossing islands would be another good countermeasure that we would like to consider. These crashes may be reduced by 46 to 56% by adding medians and crossing islands. So similar to the pedestrian in roadway query that we ran, 76% pedestrian crashes are coded non-intersection segments with no medians. So these are some additional pedestrian safety strategies that we would like to consider. Some of them are somewhat high level. You'll recognize quite a few of them as well. Ever since the 2005 Strategic Transportation Safety Plan, there are several that have been really worthy of just moving forward into each new Strategic Transportation Safety Plan. And so you'll see those here with conducting RSAs and conducting safe routes to school studies. I believe that in the current STSP, it was stated as promote conducting a safe routes to school studies. Since then, what we have done is implemented our administration of the safe routes to school studies. So that was something that was implemented with the current plan. So some others include incorporating pedestrian safety into all roadway improvements. And I think we there's a lot that we can do in that. We also have a recently adopted active transportation plan that does include some safety elements in it. And so that is another area where we can look to incorporate safety in all the planning that we do at MAG as well for pedestrians as well as for bicyclists. We'd also like to build upon best practices for high exposure and bicycle pedestrian crossing nodes. One of the things that we're taking a look at, there's a lot of tools out there for assessing risk. We're seeing more and more that we could utilize our socioeconomic, demographic, and land use data to help identify areas of safety risk for pedestrians as well as bicyclists. And this is all information that we have on our MAG webpage, so it'd be data that would be really easy for us to obtain on a day-to-day basis, really. Others include implementing the region-wide pedestrian and bicycle safety education and enforcement program that I mentioned earlier. So that will be an element of implementation for the life of this particular plan. So now we'd like to elicit some discussion for the pedestrian strategy. So the 3 questions that we asked in the assignment that was sent to you last week are highlighted here on this slide. And that, do the graphical representations really grab your attention, and are they easy to understand? So one of the things that I'd like to point out is that we would like to carry through the format of how we're showing crash data that we've highlighted here on these few past slides as a way to really communicate the safety issue, not just to you all, traffic engineers, also to planners, to policymakers, to the public. And so we want to highlight this as a new way to really grab people's attention and maybe provide some more awareness to the issue. The second question is, should any of the suggested strategies, programs, projects, or initiatives be either removed or reworded? So what we want to think about here is things that you as local agencies could easily implement, or that MAG as an organization could put in their planning and implement region-wide. So those are the 2 elements that we really want to focus on for these strategies. And then, are there any additional strategies that we would like to consider for promotion? All keeping in mind the vision that no death or injury is acceptable, and promoting the regional culture of safety with a safe systems approach. So with that, I'd like to open up for discussion. We'll be opening up for discussion after each action area. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn first for some input from the committee members.
All right, thank you, Margaret. I'll open it up for any comments. Feel free to unmute to bring up any comment or question that you might have. Or I know we have that chat button there too, but everybody's doing pretty good with unmuting and chiming in. So I'll just open it up to that right now.
And I'd be happy to go back to certain slides too, if you want to focus on a couple of those. Again, I know there's a lot of information, but kind of the idea of this meeting today, if you think about it, really is more of a workshop on identifying strategies that we would like to promote. So.
Yeah, hi, this is Sam. So I had a question. So for the slides, how are they going to be used? Are they going to be compiled into one document at the end and just as kind of a report, or are they going to be presented to the public in some way, or how are these slides intended to be used?
So that's a really good question. Thank you, Sam, members of the Transportation Safety Committee. So initially, the slides are really for your use to start looking at strategies that we would like to promote into the plan. Some of them I anticipate, yes, that we will either reformat them. Some of these are really wordy. They're intended to be that way for today's meeting, for today's workshop, really. However, it's going to be cleaned up quite a bit as we move forward with the policy committees, and then you may actually see something like this on our webpage. So we currently have a Crash Trends webpage, and it's a series of bar charts and pie charts and things like that. But we would like to utilize this to show the safety issue instead of showing a bunch of numbers on a page, because the thing that we really want to start highlighting is that these are people. They're not numbers on a data sheet. They're not a bar. They are people. So that's kind of what we're trying to convey here. So we do hope to kind of change the look of how we convey the safety issue of people who work and reside and make this region vibrant.
Margaret, I have a question for you. This is Tony Abbo over at Glendale. The median extension that you showed in one of your slides, has that been incorporated anywhere, or has there been any agencies that have used it? Because I see this treatment as possibly requiring a lot of maintenance. So I don't know, maybe I'll open it to the group to see if they've had any experiences with that. And the picture you show on this side looks like it's on the approach side, and you have something on the departure side of the crosswalk also.
Correct. I might have Mike Blankenship chime in here too, but that's a really good point that you make. I noticed that as well as when I was putting the slide together. But I think what you can see is that as a member agency, and depending on the particular location, you may need to modify what's shown. These diagrams are just that, they're diagrams.
Yeah.
And that you would have to modify it for what your condition is as appropriate. And then Mike, have you heard of any where locally this is being used? I'm not quite sure where this picture was taken, but.
Yeah, this is Mike. I'm not aware of any local use implementations of this here in Arizona, but the two nationally that are pushing this are New York City. It's part of their Vision Zero plan and implementation, and Washington, D.C. And Tony makes a good point there about the maintenance, potential maintenance issues, having these flexible delineators knocked down all the time. And that I haven't seen anything on, but we can follow up on that. In terms of safety numbers, New York City they're saying that with this treatment, they're reducing the left turn speed, which is the key here, is trying to bring that speed down in addition to some of the things Margaret mentioned. The speeds are coming down up around 19-20% reduction in left turn speeds, which obviously either gives a pedestrian a little bit more time to get out of the way, or if they are struck, they're being struck at a lower speed and have hopefully a higher chance of recovering when they are struck. And then they're also seeing close to an 80% reduction in vehicles that are crossing the double yellow line there. Oh, by the way, nice beard, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Mike, real quick, is that approach that you are looking at, are the delineators on both sides of the crosswalk?
So in the photo on the right there, they are not. They're only, as you had mentioned, they're only on the approach to that crosswalk. The schematics there do show the kind of a rubberized, the one on the right kind of shows a rubberized, raised, almost like a mini median that juts out there to try to force that vehicle to make more of a 90-degree left turn. But you're right, in the photo they're showing that little raised rubberized island on the approach side of the crosswalk.
I would imagine that would only be relevant if you had probably in one of those larger intersections where you could do that without encroaching on that extension of the curb line.
Yeah, I think the one on the right is actually probably benefiting the left turn that would be coming from the right of that picture, coming up to this crosswalk and then turning left onto the leg that's out of the photo. I don't see how that one is, you're getting much, if any, benefit out of this crosswalk here itself.
I guess the other thing to consider would be that if you were able to put that rubberized portion on the north side or on the top of the crosswalk, it may do something also to some of the U-turns.
Yeah, I will say that a lot of the applications in New York City are with one-way streets. And so there may be, you may not have as a great an option utilizing these on, two-way to two-way arterial intersections.
This is Brandon from Peoria. I just wanted to chime in for a moment. We're actually in a time where we're pulling our medians back 50 feet from the crosswalk rather than extending them further out because of cases where we actually want to eliminate negative offsets for opposing left turns. So, and again, with the one-way street, that's not an issue. So I didn't know if that was probably a limitation of this application, as well as concerns for large trucks that would need to make those turns as well. So I guess not to be a fizzle, but I mean I can just see this has its time and place, I'm sure, but certainly not everywhere.
Those are all good points, Brandon. I'm noting these as much as I can here, so thank you.
And just going back, Shane here with City of AJ, just going back to your first question, Margaret, about like how it's represented, I really found your illustrations or your exhibits of how it's represented very catching. And actually I found some of the information you gave somewhat surprising. So yeah, I really liked how you had it represented.
Thank you, Shane.
All right, any last thoughts from the committee or last comments before we move on to the next section of this?
I may want to mention just before we move on, and I'll turn it over to Mohammed for the next couple of action areas, but probably mention that there is still some time. Today is not the last time that you'll have an opportunity to provide some input. We're looking at potentially here in I think it's next Thursday as a deadline. We did send this to the stakeholders group as well. I apologize to those of you who are on the stakeholders group. You received this twice, but we have a deadline, I believe, of the 11th, I want to say, to get some final feedback from you all. So hopefully you were able to review prior to today and then came with some questions and some input or sort of feedback that you wanted to provide us, and then we can provide you some additional time to finish reviewing and coming up with your thoughts and your input. So.
This is Ryan with Mesa. I had one more question that I kind of came across, Margaret, as you went through those slides again. I didn't see anything for the mid-block locations for other things to put in, like an RRFB. Was that intentionally not put in there, or is that I just saw the section for adding a raised median as kind of a pedestrian refuge. I didn't see anything else.
I think we could definitely add something like that. I think how we worded it in the current STSP is just enhanced crossings, because that could mean medians and crossing islands. It could also mean hawks. It could mean the RFB. So we just wanted to point out that in the MAG region, the message that we're trying to convey on this bottom right-hand side here is that 76% of the non-intersection pedestrian crashes had coded on the crash report that there were no medians. So kind of pulling some of the safety issue and connecting it with a countermeasure or something that we can implement to address that 76%. But there's no reason why we couldn't reword it again as just enhanced crossings. And that way, that would include all three and maybe additional ones that are developed in the future that we don't even know about to be included within that strategy.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, hi, this is Sam here. One other question. Would it be possible to list system-wide countermeasures or things that we could, agency could kind of like say, hey, MAG is saying that we do system-wide improvements to reduce pedestrian crashes. Like have a list in here that says like these would be good system-wide things where so you could create like a capital project or something to start looking at their whole system to see where they could do certain types of things like adding RFBs or adding pedestrian hybrid beacons or things like that. There's a lot of data in here, but it doesn't specifically say, you know, like it doesn't specifically recommend system-wide, you know, certain system-wide improvements. So I don't know if that could be more clear. I know there's a bunch of things in here that's kind of like alluding to a bunch of different system-wide improvements, but I don't know. That's just a thought I had.
Thank you, Sam, members of the Transportation Safety Committee. That's a really good point. And I do believe that we have some system-wide type of countermeasures that we're going to be reviewing with the intersections action area, but there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't do that here in pedestrians as well. Especially one of the things to kind of keep in mind as well is part of the implementation is to really build projects that can be funded with that RSP, as well as potentially even HSIP. So really getting a lot of good projects in, and we could come up with something that's more of a system-wide. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sam.
Great. Thank you.
All right, so with that, I'm gonna, unless nobody else has a question, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Mohammed to review the intersections action area with you.
All right. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, committee chair and member of the Transportation Safety Committee. So this is the intersection action area, and as you can see, the regional vision is same as that of no death or injury at intersections are acceptable, and the regional culture of safety and safe system approach are the same as Margaret already mentioned before. So with this regional vision, we can take a look at the data for the MAG region in terms of intersection crashes or intersection safety. Margaret, if you can forward to the next slide. Yeah. So this slide represents a picture of the intersection crashes in the MAG region. So when you look into the graphics on the left, it shows you the percentage or the share of intersection crashes for the first one when you compare it to the state of Arizona. As you can see that for the 10-year annual average, when we consider the 10-year annual average from 2009 to 2018, 73% of the intersection crashes are occurring in the MAG region compared to the state of Arizona. And for those crashes, as you can see, 3,729 people got injured and 447 people died. And when you consider the 10-year annual average for intersection crashes, as you can see in the MAG region, 76% of those intersection crashes occurred on the local roadways compared to the freeway. And again, in those crashes occurring on local roadway, you can see 2,890 people were injured, where 372 people died. And also, when you compare the intersection and non-intersection crashes for the 10-year annual average, you can find that 55% of the crashes were actually intersection crashes compared to the non-intersection crashes. And of those 55% intersection crashes, 1,789 people were injured with 141 people dead. And when you look into the right one, graphics in the slide, as you can see, these are the four dominant collision manner for the intersection crashes with an annual average for the 10-year periods of 28,821 crashes. And the shaded area, as you can see, for each and every collision manner represents actually the total number of crashes that's occurring for the 10-year period. And the bar, as you can see with the number in it for each collision manner, shows actually the number of people that got injured and who were actually dead while being involved in crashes with this type of collision manner. For example, when you look into the left turn crashes, you can see that for the 10-year period, 54,000 people were actually injured and or died because of left turn crashes at intersection, and the total number of crashes occurring, involving left turn maneuver at intersections were 76,939. So you can see that the difference between the total number of crashes that's occurring for a specific collision manner and the total number of people that are actually dying or getting injured as a result of that specific collision manner is slim for left turn crashes. And you can see these numbers for the other collision manner for intersection crashes in the MAG region also. So, Margaret, next slide, please. So, as we were looking into the countermeasures for mitigating intersection-related crashes, as we all know that majority of the crashes have human factors involved in it, and almost 93 to 95% human factors are involved in crashes. And the safe system approach to address this type of situation is that we have to recognize that roadway users are vulnerable and roadway users are always going to continue to make mistakes. So we as engineers or planners or policymakers have to make sure or encourage forgiving road system from the very early stage of planning infrastructure to the design, construction, and maintaining an infrastructure, and so that we can actually alter the behavior of the road users, and we can actually reduce the severity and the frequency of severe crashes, even if road users are involved in crashes because of their own mistakes. And also, if we embrace the safe systems approach, the responsibility also lies onto the decision makers, planners, engineers, and roadway users to work in a holistic manner to make the system safe. So for each and every block, as you can see here, shows the proof of crash reduction for intersection-related crashes. So the first one basically shows the geometric design that can actually alter how left turn movement occur to simplify decisions and minimize the potential for related crashes. So this type of countermeasures can actually reduce the number of crashes starting with a minimum of 20%. And as you can see, some of the countermeasures listed here with their corresponding crash reduction factor. For example, the highest with the restricted crossing U-turn, 54%. Then if you install raised median, that can actually reduce 39%. Positive offset obviously can reduce 38%, and median U-turn 30%. And as Sam was asking the question, and Margaret also mentioned some of the systemic low-cost countermeasures, for example, stop control intersection. So basically, when you say systemic low-cost countermeasures, you're saying that, we are deploying a group of multiple enhanced signing and pavement markings to increase driver awareness and recognition of potential conflicts. for a left turn, So as we can see that this type of systemic countermeasures, low-cost countermeasures can reduce the number of fatal and injury crashes by 10% and also nighttime crashes by 15%. And when we look into two-way stop control, all severity of crashes, we can find that if we add left turn lanes, it can reduce the number of crashes by 28 to 48%. For right turn lane, it can reduce the number of crashes by 14 to 26%. These are ranges because these are actually multiple CRFs for different studies from crash modification factor clearinghouse for different conditions. So that's why you can see a range starting from a minimum to a maximum. And then we have the countermeasure of signal phasing. So basically, the idea is to reduction in the left turn crashes. As you can see that protected only left turn can reduce up to 100% of this type of crashes, or basically, reducing all crashes if you implement that countermeasures appropriately. And then if you can actually have appropriate yellow interval, it can reduce the number of left turn crashes by 8 to 14% and flashing yellow 12%. And there are these countermeasures of signal equipment upgrades. As you can see, the highest one with the 46%, which can actually reduce the angle crashes, followed by 42%. Angle crashes can be reduced for larger signal heads, and then improving the visibility, 29% for reduction for injury crashes, and reflective borders for signal heads with 15% reduction for all crashes. The last one here is the roundabouts. As you can see, that roundabout is definitely a major upgrade when you are trying to convert a current signalized or unsignalized intersection to a roundabout. So in that regard, you can see that when you are actually converting a two-way stop control signal into a roundabout, you are actually reducing the number of severe crashes by 82%. And when you are actually converting a signalized intersection or signal control intersection to a roundabout, you may have the potential to reduce the number of severe left turn crashes by 78%. So next slide. So this slide basically shows you the driveway intersection crashes. So this is one of the important aspects of intersection crashes. As you know, there are a lot of driveway intersection crashes, and many of these crashes basically involve roadway users who may be very vulnerable. For example, if you have bicyclists coming from the contraflow direction, you have pedestrian crossing the driveway, you have low visibility conditions. So we looked into the intersection crashes which were actually occurring at driveway, and as you can see at the very top, we found that for the 10-year period, we had a total of 20,073 crashes which were occurring at driveway intersections. And from almost completed study by TRB, we have found that when you have number of driveways decreased, you can have actually decreased in crashes up to 25% on the left, as you can see. And on the right, in the purple, you can see that you can have 68% increase in your crashes when you have driveways which are placed within 50 feet of an intersection. So these are very important factors to consider. So when you are considering improvement around your intersection, or considering to mitigate left turn crashes, or not left turn, I'm sorry, intersection crashes at driveway for reducing the number and severity of this type of crashes. So on the left, you can see that 2 in 5 crashes resulting in injury could be eliminated by reducing density of driveways per mile, and that's appropriate for urban and suburban environment or conditions. As you can see from these three crash reduction factors or crash reduction percentage, that when you are actually decreasing your number of driveways per mile from 26 to 48 to 10 to 14, you are actually reducing these crashes by 31%. And when you are actually reducing from 48 driveways per mile to 26 to up to 48, that percentage is 29%. And that percentage goes a little bit lower to 25% when you are actually reducing your number of driveways per mile from 10 to 424 to less than 10 driveways per mile. And on the right, as you can see, these are this is the condition applicable to rural environment. You can see that 1 in 5 crashes resulting in injury could be eliminated by reducing the density of driveways per mile. Again, similar to the urban suburban, as you can see, when you are reducing your driveways from current to a future improved condition to a higher number, the higher is your percentage of reduction of crashes. As you can see, that 23% reduction in this type of crashes can be achieved when you are actually reducing your driveways from 50 to less than 10. And also in the middle, you can see in the green, just to give you an approximation of how much economic losses has been incurred because of these crashes. As you can see that an average $300 million per year economic losses, that's based on the average annual of 918 people injury and 15 people dead that from crashes that's occurring at these driveways in the MAG region. And these driveway crashes, as we already mentioned, that from these 10-year annual average driveway crashes, we found that 918 people were injured and 15 people actually died on an annual average. That's actually accounting for 46% of the people injured or dead resulting from crashes occurring at driveways of all the intersection crashes in the MAG region. So that's something really important to consider. Like when we see the driveway intersection, we may not be easily at the first hand able to understand that what's the importance or significance of, these driveway intersection crashes. But you can see that's a significant percentage, 46% of the people getting injured or being dead of all the intersection crashes in the MAG region. And that's based on the average annual average of the 10-year period. And on the right side, as you can see that the number, that's 20% of all the pedestrians or bicyclists that are getting injured or killed of all the intersection crashes are occurring at the driveway intersection. So that's also something very important to consider when we are actually trying to come up with mitigation measures or actually infrastructure improvement for, improving driveway intersection safety. So Margaret, next slide, please. So these are the additional intersection safety strategies actually resulting from some of these intersection strategies. As you can find, these are already included in the Arizona DOT STSP, but there are some also which are actually focusing on MAG region based on the environment, behavior, and response strategies for improving intersection safety. For example, the first one, as you can see, that adopt ICE or intersection control evaluation policies and procedure to evaluate and select the geometry control for all intersections. And as you can see at the some of these countermeasures are already related to efforts which are already being done in MAG. For example, review and update corridor signal timing plan and coordination on a regular schedule every 3 to 5 years minimum. So that's something we do here in MAG as part of the TSOP or traffic signal optimization program. So there are some other countermeasures also to consider which actually address environment engineering, education, behavior of the road user, and also enforcement that can influence the behavior of the road user also. And there are some which are actually addressing the emergency medical services also, for example, the emergency vehicle preemption, etc. So yeah, those are some additional intersection safety strategies for your consideration when you are considering safe systems approach with the aim to have no injury or death at the intersection in the MAG region. Margaret, next slide, please. So these are same three questions that Margaret has already asked, and these are for intersection strategies. And with that, we would definitely like to open it for the committee members to have their comments, suggestions, and what do they think about the intersection safety strategies and the intersection emphasis area.
Mr. Chair, if I could, before we get questions from the committee, I wanted to point something out, and maybe Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, but with regard to the signal timing coordination, Mohammed mentioned that that's kind of the focus of the MAG traffic signal optimization program projects. However, the thinking here, I believe, is more of a local agency policy potentially. Mohammed, how many TSOP projects do we do? Or I guess really how many corridors do we do on an annual basis? And I think the intent of this one would be to go kind of beyond that number, to have it more kind of regular.
Yeah, on a typical basis, annually we do around like 7 to 9 corridors on an average.
And Mike, can you chime in on if that was the intent of this strategy?
Yes, in fact, that was one of the strategies from the updated state strategic transportation safety plan, that all agencies try to get some type of, whether it's a policy or just, suggested practice, that they are regularly and routinely checking the timing and coordination. And the recommendation in the state plan was on a cycle of about 3 to 5 years.
So this is another good example of something that the MAG region could do to support the state in improving safety as it relates to traffic signal timing. Okay.
All right, we'll open it up for any comments or questions on this segment of discussion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, one more thing. Have there been any additional members joining since we started that we should recognize right now?
Yes, I think we started out with 14 participants, so I think we're at, looks like 17. So if anybody has joined or missed the roll call at the start of the meeting, we do have that chat window. Maybe if you want to just put your name, agency, that would help us capturing who's joined us after the start, and we want to make sure everybody gets credit for joining us here today. All right, don't be shy. Or if you want to unmute and just tell us your name, agency. If not, use that chat window, please, and we'll get your name.
I'd just like to mention that it's really important that we capture everybody that attended for the minutes and also for the the public record of this meeting. So please let us know if you've joined the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll move on then. So please use that chat window to let us know if you're in the meeting. If not, we'll move on. So open it up to any questions or comments on this portion for Mohammed.
This is Ryan from the city of Mesa. I've got a couple questions, comments. One on the slide with the driveways that we were just on, if you could go back to that. I think that the middle section area that talks about the driveway density and how that can reduce if you reduce the amount of driveways is really, really good information, really useful. So I appreciate that. When we get a lot of developers that come in and we talk about taking away a driveway, it can be somewhat difficult in some instances. Was there any data or any look at, changing the driveway to a right in, right out with the installation of raised median or like a raised median pork chop? Is that something that was looked at all?
So Mike, I don't know, Mohammed, if you want to address that, but I think when we talked about this particular issue with the driveway spacing, we debated it quite a bit. And I think we've recognized over the years that it can be very controversial for your economic development portions of your agency, and just how their coordination and the focus on really getting businesses to come and build in your local agency. So this can be a really controversial issue. I think I'm glad you appreciate the information that we placed up here, because we were thinking about a way to really educate and create some awareness on the actual issue, the safety issue for the driveway spacing. Also, there's been a lot of, since back in the, 90s, a lot of the pork chops and things like of that nature put in. It seems like it's really difficult to design and build a pork chop that actually meets its intended use, and it ends up being more of a this is just my opinion, and I would welcome others who have experienced this as well to kind of chime in. But it becomes more of an enforcement issue where now police are having to enforce them, not making that left turn out. So this is the discussion that we kind of wanted to prompt with the information that's on this page. So we didn't look specifically to your question. We didn't look specifically into this countermeasure or that countermeasure. I think the point with this particular slide and the information herein is to prompt the discussion on what we could do. So with that, Mike or Mohammed, if you have anything else to add.
I think you pretty much covered everything. I just wanted to mention that, as Margaret already told, that pork chop has been used not only in the MAG region but countrywide, very extensively in some cases, and it depends on what type of situation you have is at the site. So if you are trying to properly design a pork chop for a right turn lane, or a right in, right out, so are you considering the fact that you have enough accommodation for the pedestrians or the vulnerable road users at that driveway? So those are some of the things I think we may need to consider. And I think I haven't taken a look at it, but there are CRFs for pork chops in the CMF clearinghouse, but I'm not sure exactly what's the CRF and how effective those CRFs are for different crash types. So we may be able to look into that one, for what type of situation the pork chops are applicable with different crash types and different crash severity.
Just on a side note for information overall, we didn't really put any countermeasure on here with the CRF that was lower than a 4-star. So consistent with both the HSIP as well as the RSP funding program, we're looking at things here that have that 4 or 5-star crash rating for CMF.
Mohammed. On that display where you're talking about the from 10 to 24 for less than or to less than 10 per mile, and so on. This is on. You're talking about each side of the street, not a combination of both.
Each side of the street, basically, you know, this is this information is basically from a documentation which is actually dealing with the crash modification factor for access management, and the documentation will be public soon. So I think it might be a good idea to have all the committee members have access to that document once it gets public within the next couple of weeks. And you can have more detailed information about the application of the CRF at specific situations and how these numbers were derived from different studies, actually. But yes, to answer your question, these are on one side of the roadway, not the both sides.
Any other questions, comments?
One quick question on this slide. This is Sam with Scottsdale. Was there any? Did you guys look at like driveway alignment? Because sometimes you have driveways that are like, you know, on the north side of the street, and then another driveway on the south side of the street, and they're slightly misaligned. A lot of times we try to convince developers and so on to align their driveways with one another. Is there like a CMF associated with that or anything like that?
Margaret, you wanna?
Sure, Sam. Thanks for the question, members of the Transportation Safety Committee. So as I was listening to you phrase your question, the first thing that came to mind was things that are in crash reports. And I have never seen necessarily anything like that, even in a diagram or a narrative. So the things that we looked at here were things that were actually coded and put into the database associated with each crash. So I think it would be difficult unless we were to do kind of a system-wide screening and then narrow it down by those, you know, by actually going, maybe looking on Google Maps or whatever, to look at locations that had offset driveways. But even at that, we may have to, there would be some inference as to, you know, how and to what degree that it was associated with that. So I think it would be really difficult, you know, and I believe that is kind of a policy that all member agencies have with aligning driveways across from each other to reduce that. So again, if anyone else on the committee, any committee member has come across any information like that that might be valuable in answering Sam's question, I'd be happy to hear it.
Thank you.
All right, just as a final note, Shane here, City of AJ, just with the graphics, I like the graphics, and I think that's important coming from somebody who's not really a traffic engineer, so it grabs my attention, so I do appreciate that, and the flow is easy, it's easy to read, it stands out, color combinations are great, so.
I could, Shane, ask you a quick question. So if you were to take this, let's say, to your public works director, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to take this to your city manager, would it be easy for you to kind of convey to them the issue as it relates to this the driveway spacing issue?
Yes, I think it would
okay.
help facilitate any discussion, but even even information that could stand alone to a degree is great. That if they walk away from the discussion, they can easily have this to look at and reference easily, and maybe even adapt into their own presentations to the policy groups or council members.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sorry, I just had one other comment. I like that slide with the green background. I'm not sure what number it was, where it did show all the different. Yeah, that one. Yeah, it would be interesting if that could be in the other sections as well. Something along those lines.
Thank you, Sam.
All right. I think, is there one more section to this, Margaret?
Actually, there are two more.
Okay.
And Mohammed's going to take this one as well. Go ahead, Mohammed.
All right. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Mr. Chair and member of the Transportation Safety Committee. Again, this is the action area of lane departure with the regional vision of no death or injury related to lane departure is acceptable, with the same regional culture of safety and the safe systems approach. So with that, we're gonna get into the numbers for the lane departure crashes. As you can see on the left side of your screen, these 3 percentages are actually showing the percentage for lane departure crashes. So the first one, 45%, shows that of the total MAG region lane departure fatal crashes for the 10-year period from 2009 to 2018, 45% were single vehicles and 38% were actually on two-way undivided roadway, and 47% had actually some type of dark conditions, meaning that they were either lighted or non-lighted. And these are of all fatal lane departure crashes in the MAG region for the last 10-year periods. Now, when you go into the right side of your slide, as you can see these orange bars, these are basically the 10-year annual average. And as you can see that the MAG 10-year annual average of lane departure crashes amounted to 10,484 crashes, which actually accounts for 13% of all MAG region crashes for the last 10 years on an annual average basis. And for the same time frame, when you look into the person injury, you can see that 22% of the people injured for the last 10 years in the MAG region on an annual average basis, 22% were actually lane departure, which amounted to actually 8,131 people getting injured. And the last one is basically the eye-opener, which says that 53% of the annual average fatalities in the MAG region were actually related to crashes with lane departure. So that's amounting to 235 people dying on an annual basis each year on an average in the MAG region for the last 10 years, resulting from their involvement in lane departure crashes. So Margaret, if you can go to the next slide, please. So for these lane departure crashes, what we try to do is we try to find out what are the main collision manners for these lane departure crashes, and try to tie those collision manners with the FHWA proven countermeasures so that this type of crashes can be mitigated with real meaningful improvement in lane departure safety. So for example, you can see the one with the yellow colors are basically the one which are actually documenting the FHWA proven countermeasures, and the green one, as you can see at the bottom, are basically countermeasures which have significant crash reduction factors, but not necessarily FHWA proven countermeasures. So for the first one, if you can see the crash collision manner for lane departure crashes, head-on and side swipe, you can see that 36% of the fatalities and injuries in lane departure crashes basically occurred with head-on and side sweep collision manner in the MAG region for the time frame we considered for analyzing the crash data, which is the 10-year. So the FHWA proven countermeasure for these types of crashes are longitudinal rumble strips, median barrier, and safety edge. And in the parentheses, you can see the corresponding crash reduction factors for these countermeasures. And second, you can see the negotiation of a curve. As you can see that 6% of the fatal and serious injury lane departure crashes are occurring in the MAG region when drivers are actually trying to negotiate a curve. So these type of crashes can be actually mitigated with FHWA proven countermeasures of roadside design improvement at curve. There are multiple engineering improvement that can be done, such as cable median barrier, guardrail, concrete barrier, and those countermeasures have CRF ranging from 25 to 94%. And then there is also enhanced delineation or friction for horizontal curve, for which the CRF ranges from 25 to 57%. And there are other collision manners for which, as you can see, the associated engineering countermeasures or the improvement, for example, overturn or rollover crashes. As you can see, 19% of the fatal and serious injury lane departure crashes involve overturn rollover as the first harmful event in the MAG region. And 37% of the fatalities and serious injuries for lane departure in the MAG region involved only a single vehicle. So these type of problems can be mitigated by some of the countermeasures which are mentioned here. For example, shoulder widening can decrease this type of crashes by 5 to 23%, remove or relocate the objects within the recovery area 38%, and flattening the side slopes can reduce this type of crashes by 22 to up to 42%. Margaret, if you can advance to the next slide. So these are also some additional lane departure strategies. Again, some of the countermeasures or strategies outlined here are also included in the state STSP. For example, the one which says improve shoulders by dispensing aggregate along the road edge to provide a more stable recovery area beyond the edge of the pavement. And then speeding and speed-related enforcement on prioritized high-risk segment for lane departure crashes basically involved actually altering behavior through enforcement also. And also, when we looked into the crash data, we saw that aggressive driving, impaired driving, fatigue, and distracted driving can also be addressed in the lane departure crashes by implementing some educational campaign in the MAG region-wide education strategies, which can ultimately result in altering behavior and improving safety for people who are involved in lane departure crashes in the MAG region. So this is relatively short, this one, the lane departure emphasis area. As you know, many of the lane departure severe crashes and frequency of lane departure crashes are occurring on state highway system segments. But again, we do have roadway segments where we need to address this lane departure safety problem. And one point to mention here that we have also included the high friction surface treatment in the previous slide as a countermeasure to, negotiate a curve or a curve segment for reducing the lane departure crashes. And as of now, we know there are initiatives that's going on at the state level to use high friction surface treatment as a low cost countermeasure to improve lane departure crashes. And also McDOT is going on with a project on a pilot basis to implement high friction surface treatment on some of the roadway segments owned by McDOT. So once McDOT implements this project, I think representative from McDOT can put more light on this one. But yeah, once this project is implemented, we can have more knowledge, or we can actually learn more about high friction application of high friction surface treatment in the MAG region on a systemic level, if it needs to be, by analyzing the lane departure crashes on prioritized highway segments or roadway segments. So with that, Margaret, if you can, open it for the discussion for lane departure strategies, we would be happy to, answer questions and take comments from you.
All right, again, for information discussion, so open for any comment. Any questions?
Hi, this is Sam C. Scottsdale again. So one of the things we've been doing recently has been trying to widen a lot of our bike lanes when we're doing pavement projects, pavement rehabilitation projects. Have you guys looked at maybe like how widening bike lanes or wider shoulders affect lane departure crashes as an added benefit to widening bike lanes?
So, can you repeat that question one more time, Sam, please, if you don't mind? I was just trying to.
Was there anything in here about how widening shoulders or bike lanes would reduce the severity and frequency of runoff road crashes, lane departure crashes?
Yes. So yes, basically there are widespread documentation of how widening shoulder can actually contribute to reducing the number of and the severity of lane departure crashes. So there are, we haven't specifically looked into each and every CRF for each and every conditions or each and every severity and crash type, but it is pretty much well documented that the countermeasure that you just talked about, shoulder widening, has significant effect on reducing severity and number of lane departure crashes. But again, that will depend on the specific condition and from how many feet existing shoulder width you are actually increasing to your shoulder width. For example, there are specific countermeasures with crash reduction factors in the crash modification factor clearinghouse that says that if you widen your shoulder from, for example, from 6 feet to 8 feet, you have this CRF, which are going to reduce your number and severity of crashes. And there are multiple countermeasures of that sort in the crash modification clearinghouse. And also, there is a very detailed document from the NCHRP 500 series, which has actually a lot of emphasis area, including the lane departure. So in the NCHRP 500 series, where the emphasis area is lane departure, it clearly shows or demonstrates the benefits of shoulder widening that has on reducing the number of lane departure crashes. So according to what we know, I would say that yes, there are documented studies and documented reports which demonstrate that there are a real benefit in widening the shoulder to mitigate lane departure crashes. But it will again depend on the condition of your site, and also it will depend on the type of the crashes and the severity of the crashes that you are trying to address.
Okay, thank you. Do you know if a bike lane can be considered as a shoulder in those cases?
Again, just to add on to that one, yes, I think on the top of my head, what I remember is from reviewing that NCHRP 500 document for the lane departure, it clearly shows that even if you consider bike lane, it might have some effect, but I don't exactly remember whether it was a positive or negative effect, but there were multiple strategies which is not related to directly related to, for example, shoulder widening, but some accommodating other roadway users that might be related to reducing the severity or the number of lane departure crashes, or at least keeping the roadway users within the lane. For example, there are strategies which also talk about the design of your curb, which you can actually modify to reduce the lane departure crashes. Might not be directly related to reducing lane departure crashes, but it might have some effect on reducing lane departure crashes. For example, there is also another factor, like when you are putting rumble strips, there is this concern that when you are trying to address lane departure crashes by providing rumble strips, are you basically accommodating the bike users? Are bike users gonna have proper accommodation when you are putting rumble strips in terms of their spacing and in terms of making sure that their wheel is not actually getting trapped inside the groove of the rumble strip? So those type of all information can be found from the detailed report from the NCHRP 500 lane departure emphasis area.
This is Mike Blankenship. Just to add one more thing, I think what might be key here from Sam's question is, hey, if bike lanes, they're great for bicyclists, but the added benefit is we reduce or run off road crashes by 20%. That's a nice selling point to decision makers that, hey, this isn't just a bike lane project, and it's not just helping the bicyclists. We're helping anybody that might run off the road there.
Yeah,
And,
thank you, Mohammed.
Brandon with Peoria as well. There's another benefit is it helps visibility at intersections as well.
Okay.
All right, anything else as we go into the next segment? All right, hearing none, I guess we have one more segment to go.
And we're going to let Mike Blankenship go ahead and cover the safety-related data.
Yeah, so obviously, if we don't all know by now, data is key for all of these action areas and telling the story of what's happening out there from a crash standpoint. So we just want to go through a couple of slides here that talks about how important and why this data is important. So basically, the crash data collection starts right after the crash happens, and our law enforcement is out there collecting data, filling out the police crash report form. And that is crucial for all of that data we just have been discussing, is getting a pretty accurate and pretty timely crash report filled out and turned into ADOT so that it gets into the state crash database, ALICE. And then eventually, now ADOT has what used to be called Safety Data Mart. It's now ACES, the Arizona Crash Information System, a nice dashboard of crash data with all kinds of querying capabilities. And then once that data is in a database, here, at least in the MAG region, we have RT SIMS, which is a nicer querying system specifically for MAG and its member agencies. In terms of timeline for how quickly we can get to crash data, ADOT is generally about 6 months from getting all crashes in until verifying that it's about as accurate as it's going to get. So come June or July of the year, the crash data from the previous year is ready. So here we're in May. In the next month or two, 2019 crash data should be available from ADOT. And once that data is available, then MAG can import it and get it into RT SIMS. One thing to keep in mind from the timeliness standpoint is the RT SIMS data is only going to be updated basically once a year. So let's say it gets updated July of this year for the 2019 data. If next June you're trying to put together an application for a safety project and you need crash data, if you're using RT SIMS at that point, the crash data is more than a year old. in terms of, or a year behind, almost a year and a half behind. So I guess my recommendation would be ACES is a little more up to date. In fact, ACES gets updated pretty much on a daily basis. It's just not verified for 6 months. So keep that in mind as you're wanting to use the crash data. But once it is in RT-SIMS, it's a nice user-friendly system to do queries, to pull crash data. It's been used, as you can see on the right there, for looking for identifying top 100 intersections, and then that feeds right into trying to determine where the next round of RSA should be conducted. For your project analysis and putting in for funding applications. A lot of agencies aren't doing the before-after analysis of safety projects. It is a federal requirement, and ADOT has been trying to do some of that on HSIP projects, but that's another use for the crash data. And then I think the most important from maybe a local agency standpoint is trying to get your hands on some of this money that's out there, whether it's the federal Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP money, or the new MAG, RSP funding. And again, this crash data lends you great support for those funding applications. Next, Mark. So the accuracy of data, and the number here, 33%, a left turn crash study that MAG did a few years ago, looked at 5 years worth of data and found that about a third of the angle and head-on crashes or crashes that had been coded as angle and head-on within ALICE, the ADOT database, and then getting into RT-SIMS were miscoded. They actually should have been coded as left-turn crashes. And that's huge when you start thinking about all those countermeasures we've talked about. Should we be focusing on head-on and angle countermeasures because that's what the database told us, or really we should be concentrating more on left turn crash countermeasures? So we need to keep that in mind. The timeliness we talked about, depending on how often or how up to date you need your crash data. I will say that when you're putting in for the HSIP applications, the state only looks at fatal and serious injury crashes. And you do want to check the ADOT ACES database to see if there have been any crashes that have occurred within the last year, and not just go off of the most current data that ADOT is saying they have. So if you can squeeze another, and it sounds barbaric, but if you can squeeze another fatal crash into your application, your benefit cost ratio, jumps tremendously. Gives you more opportunity to try to get some of those funds. Uniformity. So we did an RSA a few years ago, a MAG RSA at 48th Street and Southern. So this is an intersection that's partly in city of Tempe, partly in Phoenix, and that could have contributed to some of this. But when we pulled the crash reports and did a deep dive into the crash data, 55% of the angle and head-on crashes had been miscoded and should have actually been left turn crashes. So this 33% number was based on a region-wide study, but when you start looking at individual intersections, that number can be a lot higher. And part of that is, police officers are coding it as the way the vehicles ended up at the end of the collision. And if it looked like an angle crash, that's what it gets coded as, even if it was a vehicle turning left. So I think that's more an education piece, maybe with the law enforcement as they're filling out these crash reports. Next, Margaret. So again, these are recommendations. Hopefully some agencies will try to put some of these into their guidelines and policies. But that first one there, are we seeing any trends or problems in the data collection? And we've talked about a couple of them, specifically with left turn crashes. ADOT with its strategic transportation safety plan, they've developed a few task forces that meet quarterly, and one of them is a data emphasis area. So if you are interested in the data end of things, that would be a good one to start participating in. The third one there, TRACS electronic crash reporting system. So if you're not familiar with this, that's basically traffic and criminal software package that ADOT has been pushing for local agencies to make use of. And I think right now what they're estimating is about 70% of the crash report forms that they get in are coming through TRACS, which makes it get into the system a lot quicker. It's less chance of error, coding errors when you're taking it from the hard copy police crash report forms and uploading it into ADOT's database. Some of the other key ones here, encouraging more use of RT Sims. I don't know how many of you are taking advantage of it, but it is a nice package that MAG has put together. They've got a lot of standard queries already developed in there. It's pretty easy to do custom queries when you're starting to, especially when you're starting to look at prioritizing locations for your limited funds for safety projects. Providing assistance to agencies as they're putting together their funding applications, whether it's an HSIP application, ADOT, or the MAG RSP application. Getting some good technical help on putting those together, whether it's through your on-call consultants, through MAG's on-calls, or in-house. And then I wanted to hit on that last one. Margaret hit on it previously, but it's trying to make better use of existing data, and not just the crash data, but existing socioeconomic, land use, demographic data, especially with our vulnerable road users, pedestrians and bicyclists. So we can get into the MAG database and pull out information like where we have a high percentage of households with no vehicles, which could indicate we're going to have a higher proportion of pedestrians and maybe bicyclists. You know, higher proportion of poverty and disabled. In terms of land use, locations that have lots of bus stops, transit stops, apartments, parks and schools. Circle K's on one side of the street and a school or an apartment complex on the other side of a 5-lane arterial. So making better use of existing data to basically predict where we may have some safety issues, even if it hasn't shown up yet in the crash data. So with that, open it up again to questions and comments from the data strategies standpoint.
All right, any questions, comments out there?
Hi, this is Sam Taylor, City of Scottsdale. Sorry to keep making comments, but I just wanted to note on the Arizona crash report form, they recently changed the limit of estimated total damage from $1,000 to $2,000, and if a crash is coded as being less or under that $2,000 limit, it's not being entered into the ACES database. I just was heard that today, so I didn't know if anyone was aware, but I think that'll decrease the amount of those less severe crashes that we're seeing in ADOT's data quite a bit.
Yes, this is Mohammed. Just to add on to that one, so basically with the introduction of the new ADOT crash report form, this change you mentioned, the issue is that there are agencies in the MAG region who are actually still using the older version of the crash report form because of the fact that, you know, their system has been designed in such a way that it can accommodate the older crash report form. And if you want to incorporate the newer crash report form, I think there are significant financial resources that needs to be put into place, either to incorporate the new crash report form into the existing system or to migrate to crash reporting system, which already has the new crash report form. So just to inform you that there are still agencies in the region who have to actually use the older version of the crash report form to report their crashes. And in those instances, the crashes are going to be reported in the ACs if they are using the older report forms based on the information from the older version of the crash report form.
All right, anything else? Any other questions, comments? Again, for information and discussion. I believe that was the last one. So do you have any final note, Margaret, or reminder on this?
Yeah,
item?
there's just a couple of quick slides that I'll have Mike go through, just kind of outlining what our next steps are. But before we do that, and that's for the plan in general, but before we leave the discussion regarding strategies, I just wanted to mention that I looked at my calendar and the deadline is June 4th. If you could please have your input on any one of these areas. Again, thinking of these 3 questions that we've posed to you, and keeping in mind the vision and this culture of safety. So end of business Thursday, June 4th. Thank you. And then Mike, if you want to go ahead, just really quickly go through these last couple slides.
Sure. Yeah, what we've been discussing here today is mainly task 5, developing the strategies. Task 6 is developing strategies for the regional transportation plan. Whether that's, we've had a few people mention systemic types of projects that could be implemented citywide or region-wide. But we're going to be using the current, and Margaret, I'm not sure what the deadline is now, but the current call for RTP projects, we're going to use that information out of that to provide guidance on some of the safety strategies that should be recommended for incorporation into the next update of the RTP.
Yeah, that has actually closed already.
Okay.
Most of you are aware of that. I want to say they received over 1,300 applications or submissions, I want to say. My understanding is that they're still kind of working through all of them, and we hope to get a little bit clearer picture here in the near future for our use.
Okay. Task 7, we've actually been working on this one, and this is what are the safety implications of some of the emerging technologies, connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and how can that be incorporated here into the MAG region, and ultimately try to identify a couple of potential pilot projects. And what we're trying to focus on here is what has already been implemented from an agency, from a public standpoint, whether it's a state DOT, a city, a county, and how might that have application here in the MAG region. And then task 8, I think a lot of the infographics that we've seen today with the safety strategies, some of that will feed into task 8, which is on MAG's online presence. What's the best way to tell this safety story through all the data that we have that is really attention grabbing and meaningful and helps both the road users, the public, to change their behavior, but also our engineers, our planners, our decision makers. And then pulling it all together basically in tasks 9 and 10 with the implementation plan and the final report. Turn it back to either Margaret or Shane.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. All right. Looks like we'll move on to the next agenda item here. I know the meeting's getting long. I think we've done great with discussion and using this Zoom platform today. So kudos to everybody making our way through. So number 5 item on the agenda, report by committee members on transportation safety activities. And for the sake of time, and feel free to throw out a point of order, Margaret, if I'm doing this wrong, but for the sake of time, maybe I'll just give a few seconds if anybody has any report that for the interest of the group that they wish to speak now.
I think that's fine, Shane. We typically go through the list, but if you wanted to contribute something for your agency, please be sure to indicate that in the chat box. I personally cannot see the chat box right now, so I'm relying on Mohammed and Shane to let me know. So.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Good idea. All right, we'll move on to number 6, requests for future agenda items. So just put out there if there any committee members have any topics of issues of interest they would like to have considered for discussion in future meetings, please indicate. Maybe again, like Margaret said, use the chat box. We will capture those items and we'll make sure Margaret gets them for any future meetings. All right, next item is just number 7, next meeting, date and place. Next meeting we have scheduled for the Transportation Safety Committee will be held at 10 a.m. Tuesday, June 23rd. And again, probably be virtual unless otherwise noted or us notified. All right. And with that, I guess we'll move to adjournment. So I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and it's looking like about 11:54. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.